Hey, hello, welcome. So in previous video we have learned how we can use the scope handler, scope fault handler. So here if you will see, we got the exception or we got the error while running this integration in this scope. That exception or error will be handled by this default fault handler. So but now suppose if we got the global exception, exception, it means that if we got the exception or error in the integration outside any scope, so what will happen? For handling such kind of issue, we have global fault handler. So here first I will generate the exception so that I can understand you the how we can handle that exception. So for generating the exception, what I will do, I will create one variable. That variable will be a string variable, and in that string variable I want to assign the data type, date data type value, so that it can generate the exception. So here we are creating one variable var date. Okay, so here if you will see, when we are creating any variable, that default type of that variable is a string. Okay, so let me reduce the size. So let me change the name of this variable, that var underscore date. Okay, so in this variable I want to assign the value as date. Okay, current date. So here if you will see, I want to assign that current date. It will execute over here, but when we will try to run this integration, we will get the exception at the time of creating this variable and assigning the value date types of value to this string variable. So we will get exception over here. So once we will get the exception, our integration will start over here and it will return back the exception or error. So how we can handle that exception, so that we will return back the status message or return back the whatever mapper, whatever response we created based on that. So let me save this integration, close, and let me execute this integration. So here if you will see, in this integration, let me run this integration. So here I have activated the integration first. So after the activation of this integration, let me test. So here if you will see, I am passing the value 10 divided by 2, it will return back the result as 5, but we are getting the exception. Here you can see that when we are getting the exception, in response, if you will see, in response we are getting exception. We are not getting the response, whatever response we configure response as a process message and result, but we are not getting the response because our integration is ended here. When we got the exception, our integration is ended over here. Here you can see that in activity stream you can see that it's completed, executed, that it's used the assign result. In assign variable, it's updated the value as 5, it's updated the variable where status as success. But after that scope ended, we try to create variable using assign var date, and in using assign we are trying to create one variable, a string variable. In that string variable we try to assign date type of data. So here we get exception like value is invalid exception. So how we will handle this exception, so that we can get the response, not we can get the error. So for handling that kind of issue, we have global fault handler. So let me deactivate this integration and edit this integration again. So here if you will see, in our integration, whenever we can get idea about that, we can get the exception outside any scope. If we got exception outside this scope, it means that that exception is globally. So we have to handle that exception globally. For handling this exception, we have option for fault handler, global fault handler. So here if you this is our integration page, right? This is integration canvas, and if we get any exception in this integration outside this scope, here we have global fault handler for handling that exception. So just click over here, it will open another page. That page is that global fault handler page here. So here what kind of business requirement is that, what kind of logic you want to perform, all the logical operation you can perform over here. Whatever logical operation you can perform in integration page, same you can do on this fault handler, global fault handler page. So here right now, so if you will see, by default it's showing that a start endpoint, and this is the rethrow the exception. So I don't want to rethrow the exception. In that case I will delete this, and what I want is that I want to return back the control to the integration where this exception is generated. So for rethrowing, we have an endpoint that is return. So here using this return, we can return back that exception. So here what we want to do is that we want to map the value. Once we try to return back the exception to the main integration. So in main integration we have response. So this is the mapper. This is the mapper for that main request, main integration. Here if you will see the map to start rest, and also if you will return back to the integration, here you can say that we have map to start rest. So here same we are adding this integration, this mapping over fault handler. So here again we come back to the fault handler, global fault handler by clicking on this, and here I want to map the value. What value I want to map? Right now we got the exception, right? So once we got the exception, I just want to map the value status as create node. In status I want to add the error message. So error handled by global fault handler, so that the user can understand what kind of issue we face, what kind of error we got, and in result I don't want to put any values, right? So result will be empty, or you can just create a node and you can put the null value. So whatever logical implementation you want to implement, you can do. So here I am just going to close. So here what will happen is that if we got exception, right, if we will get the exception, the control will come here in global fault handler. In this global fault handler, we are going to map and we are ending the integration with the mapping value. So whatever value we map, it will return back the same status. So here again we are going to return back to integration. So in integration, if you will see, everything will be performed over here. Here we are getting the exception. That exception will be handled by this global fault handler, and in this global fault handler we are returning back the exception to main integration, and in main integration we are ending with this mapping value. So here whatever value we have mapped, it will be returned back in response of that particular integration. So just save this integration, close, and let me activate this integration first. So here I have activated. It will take some time to activate. So once this is activated, let me run this integration. So once I will going to run, here you can see that once I will try to run, it will return back the response. It will not return back the error. Here you can see that we got error in this point in earlier, before implementing the global fault handler. Our integration is going to stop over here. We are not going to process next, but by handling the exception in global fault handling, you can see that it's encounter the global fault handler trigger. Inside that global fault handler we have mapped the value, and that map the value is going to end by the integration. So here you can see that we return back the response. We got the response, we didn't get the error. Right now we got the response, and whatever value we set for the response, we are getting the same. In a status I have mapped that here error handled by the global fault handler, and in the result we put the null value. So here using this way you can handle the global exception, you can implement the global fault handling in your integration. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe our channel, and don't forget to like this video. Thank you so much.